Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan, and on behalf of Book Soup, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for our virtual event with Dana Schwartz in conversation with Maureen Johnson discussing Anatomy, a love story. For regular updates on upcoming events, please feel free to subscribe to our email newsletter. This evening's virtual event will end with a Q&A. To submit a question, please use the Ask a Question button at the bottom of the screen. If you see a question on that list that you'd like for our speakers to answer, please click the like button, and we will try to answer as many questions as time will allow. Also, please consider supporting our bookstore and the author's work by purchasing a copy of today's featured book. Just click the green Purchase button directly below the viewer screen, and that link will redirect to our website where you can continue your checkout process. And Dana signed the books yesterday, so we have lots of signed copies.
I did.
And now a few words about our featured guests. Maureen Johnson is the #1 New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of several YA novels, including 13 Blue Envelopes, Sweet Scarlet, The Name of the Star, and Truly Devious. She has also done collaborative works such as Let It Snow with John Green and Lauren Miracle, now on Netflix, and several works in the Shadowhunter universe with Cassandra Clare. Her work has appeared in publications such as The New York Times, BuzzFeed, and The Guardian. And she has also served as a scriptwriter for EA Games. She has an MFA in writing from Columbia University, and she's joining us tonight from New York City. Dana Schwartz is a television writer and the creator of the #1 charting history podcast, Noble Blood. As journalist and critic, Dana has written for Entertainment Weekly, Marie Claire, Glamour, GQ, Cosmopolitan, Vanity Fair, and more. She lives in Los Angeles with her fiance and their cats, Eddie and Beetlejuice. Her books include Choose Your Own Disaster, The White Man's Guide to White Male Writers of the Western Canon, and as of today, Anatomy, a Love Story. And without further ado, I'm going to turn the camera over to Dana and Maureen. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the presentation.
Whee! Okay, he's gone.
Yeah, finally. Oh,
We're not talking about this end of book at all. We're not. That's not what this is about, you guys. This is a planning
going
session.
rogue, keeping all of you hostage.
Mm-hmm. Welcome to everybody. I've been reading down the list on the side here where everybody's from. We have somebody from Derry, Ireland, as in Derry Girls, which is, if you haven't seen it, a wonderful show.
The slight Irish connection to this book, I do have to say, is because I host a podcast, there was a time period where they thought that I was going to do the audiobook, and I thought this too. But it turns out that this book takes place in Scotland, and my editor wanted some of these Scottish characters to have Scottish accents. And I can't do a Scottish accent. And they got me an accent coach. I practiced a lot. I listened to like Scottish audiobooks. I really did. And at the end of the day, the best I could do was Irish. And it's like, it's not the same. I just don't know what's wrong with my brain.
This is the only Scottish trick I have.
Yeah.
Say the words space and ghouls.
Should I just space school? Space school.
Space ghouls.
Space
okay.
School. Yeah. Okay.
Apparently that's a hack to say Spice Girls.
Oh, Spice Girls. Nope. See, I'm doing Irish again. I can't do it.
Space schools.
But see, this is the problem. Like, luckily I have an amazing actual actress doing the Anatomy audiobook. I just needed someone to save me from myself. Space schools.
Don't even try. Just say it. Space schools.
It's like the Michael Caine thing. Have you heard that?
No.
If you say my cocaine, it's like saying Michael Caine, like the way
as Michael Caine.
Yeah, try it again.
Wow. It's just my cocaine?
My cocaine.
My cocaine.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a presentation on, I almost said Noble Blood. I'm like, no, Maureen, that's the podcast.
Accent hacks with Dana and Maureen.
Accent talking with Dana and Maureen. So we're here to talk about Anatomy, which I don't want to brag. I read way back.
Oh, forever ago.
Like not a year ago, but a while ago.
Probably like 8 months.
And it's weird. I did reread it today, but I could still remember almost everything about it in a way that I was like, oh, right. Oh, that's about to happen. Now, I know that sounds pretty obvious, like you've read the book before, but it was still pretty visceral, is what I mean. Like it was still right under the surface.
Oh,
I mean,
Maureen, thank you so much. That means so much, especially because your books, I feel like your mystery series was one of the books that helped influence anatomy, because it was one of the books when I was like reading a lot of YA to get back in the like mental mode, reading Box in the Woods, and that like blend of like spooky mystery really helped me get in that headspace.
First thing, I just want to know from the chat, and I'm looking at you, chat, like the whole time I'm watching you. How many of you have already read it, heard some of it? Anybody? I'm just going to watch to see if any of you reply. It's going to all go all at once you start replying, because that's the way it happens. It lags and it goes blurf. So I'll let it catch up for a second. Is it blurfing already for you?
Oh, yeah.
It's starting to blurf. So there is a place in this called Hawthornden Castle.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. Hawthornden Castle is real. And
guess how I learned about it?
Both of us have stayed in it. Both of us have spent a month in it.
I learned about this amazing writers retreat because Maureen was kind enough to share her experience and let me know that it was like this rad writing experience. And it was incredibly cool.
What month did you go in?
It was summer. I think it was June.
Oh, I went in February.
Oh, it must have been so cold and rainy. Were you just holed up the entire time?
It was, so this castle, which is a real castle as described in the book, I was like, oh yeah, I know that spot and that little thing under the house.
It's real. It's real.
It's real. You can go there. It is owned by a very rich family that operates it as a writing retreat, and they give out these fellowships to 5 authors a month.
Yeah.
And you get everything. They cook your meals, they do your laundry, and you just write all the time. And when I went there, there was no internet. Full stop.
No internet for us either.
Okay. No televisions and no internet.
No TV, no internet. Your cell phone, even if you have like a data plan, you would not get reception.
Yeah, it's nothing works. You're literally in the woods. They did put this little radio in your room with headphones that you could listen
to that.
If you looked in the drawer, they give you a little tiny radio.
I listened to music on my phone. You were allowed to do that.
Yeah, you could listen to stuff that if you could get it.
Yeah.
And but they also left when I was there, they left us a little radio. And at night when it was very quiet, I'd be like, I'm just listening to Radio 4. I sort of lost my marbles for the first 2 weeks of it because I went in February and it got dark at 2 p.m. And that's intense. That's a fairly intense experience. And you can't reach the outside world. And then once we really got into it, that was, then you start to really kind of enjoy it almost. Like here I am separate from the world.
Yeah, I would say I went stir crazy pretty early on because I'm just someone who procrastinates a lot with a lot of internet. And without internet, I think I read like 15 books over the course of it. I just read so much because I'm like, okay, well, I have writer's block, so I better just read. And then I realized there was like a cafe where there was internet, like a 45-minute walk away. So then I made it where it's like, if I did my writing, I would give myself also the excuse to like go take a long walk and like check my email once a day and like walk back, just to have like a nice like daily routine where I wrote all morning, ate my lunch. And if I did a good job, I would walk there, walk back, and then like read all night.
Yeah, I would walk there and buy something like marshmallows, or I would buy a product and bring it back to the house. Like, I brought us this thing. It's a box of chocolate and a bottle. Two things.
Did you have sherry for like the guy?
Yeah.
Would give you sherry for 50 cents. I hated sherry. I learned.
Every night there was sherry at 6 p.m. and it was an honor system where at the end you would pay your 50p or whatever for every glass of sherry you drank. And I didn't want it, but everyone's like, aren't you going to drink the sherry? And I'd be like,
yeah. I was like, okay. I think I
fine. I
had
guess I'll
2
drink a
glasses
sherry.
of sherry the whole time. But yes, Hawthornden, which Hazel lives at, is fully based on the Hawthornden Castle, which is outside of Edinburgh, because it was just fun. I mean, it was like the writer's hack of like, write what you know. And like, here is a Gothic castle on a hill outside of Edinburgh with a dungeon underneath it. So why I was writing it while I was there. I was like, why wouldn't I describe it?
Why not?
Yeah.
I wrote it partially into one of my books as well.
It's
so
a magical place. It really is.
I also got locked in that dungeon.
No.
I did on my first night. No one knew I was there. Yeah, I was there. I got there and I went down to look for a book because they had a library in there. And I went to look for a book, and all of a sudden, so this dungeon is down some steps and it has a thick medieval door like that thick.
Yeah.
And I was just looking around. It went thunk, and I hear chunk, and I heard the bolt slip, and I was locked in. And because they did not know I had arrived. So I was pounding on the door like, sorry. Oh, Dana's frozen. Have I frozen? Is Dana frozen? I can't tell if I'm frozen.
She's frozen. Let me refresh.
Okay. It's all right. We'll carry on. I was locked in the dungeon that you'll see there's important scenes that take place in there. I have been locked in that dungeon, and it is frightening. Thank you. Yes. So Dana will be right back with us, but I'll talk about it. She's really cool. But I'm really glad she went there. I was like, you will have a good time, but you will be by yourself. And I was with a guy who every day, he was a reporter from the BBC. And early on, the first thing he asked for was an axe. And then every day after breakfast, he would just go out into the woods and bring his axe. And on my very last day there, he said, "Hey, Johnson, want to come out into the woods with me?" And he had his axe. And I was like, sure, why not? And I followed him into the woods to find out what he had been doing with his axe all that time, because apparently I was like, this is how I go. I'm fine with it. And he had just been chopping down a tree that had fallen into the path. But I was fully like, look, we all got to go sometime. I'm just going to follow this dude into the woods with an axe. And that is just an example of my incredibly fine decision-making capability. I'm glad that Dana is smarter than me and probably didn't follow random guys. I knew him pretty well at that point, and I still went with him. So, and I still got nothing on that one. But I was locked in the dungeon. I went out into the woods to follow a guy with an axe. I got lost in the woods one night and thought I was going to die in the woods. I had a lot of adventures. She went in a much better time of year when it's light until 11 p.m. as opposed to 2 p.m. I'm just going to check on the questions because it's a good time to see.
We'll have Dana back in a second.
That's fine, because I just want to see if any of your questions sort of relate to this, because I certainly have a lot of questions about how she incorporated that. I was so excited to see Hawthornden incorporated into this. It is truly magical. It has a lot of places. It pops up a lot in literary history sometimes, like various poets that went there. You okay?
Yeah.
Oh no! Oh
yes, that was truly my nightmare. I was like logging in on my phone, being like, "Why am I gone?"
You're a little pixelated, but you're back.
I'm back. That's the important thing. I'm like, I literally tried to like log out of everything.
It's all good.
But I'm back.
I was explaining that when I was in Hawthornden, one of the fellow people at Hawthornden asked for an axe on the first day and disappeared into the woods with it every single day. And on the last day, he invited me into the woods after breakfast to see what he'd been doing with his axe. And I went with him because I'm not smart.
What was he doing with his axe?
He was cutting apart a tree that had fallen in a path. But it was very just, that's the kind of thing. That's the kind of thing that Hawthornden makes you do.
My Hawthornden thing was that every night I would play cards with a lovely Polish man who was a translator. And he taught me this card game that he knew that I can't remember the name of and have forgotten all the rules for. But he beat me every single time, every night for a full month.
Was he just making up the rules as he went along?
Kind of seemed like it. I did beat him. He let me beat him like once, like tantalizingly to give
That's
me.
how they.
That's how
That's
they
how they get you.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how they get you.
But yes, Hawthornden. Thank you very much. Sorry about the delay. I feel like every book launch I have has to have a nightmare involved. My last book was called Choose Your Own Disaster. Not my last book, but like my last like in-person book launch event, I guess. And it is the first and only time in my life I ever fainted. I was mid-reading. I was like standing at the podium. I was about to do an interview with like a moderator who I liked a lot. And they were like, okay, well, Dana's going to read for 10 minutes. And like, as I was reading, the words like started not making sense in my brain. And I got that like sort of tinny taste in my mouth and my vision narrowed. And then I guess I just fully fainted.
What happened?
I don't know. I just hadn't eaten enough and it was really hot and I was stressed out, nervous. Book launches are stressful. So if all it is a frozen video and I got booted from my, the live stream, I feel like that's a miracle. That counts as a success in my book.
Being authors means that we're not super good sometimes in physical form.
No, I'm very awkward and clearly.
Well, you're not. You're very elegant, as evidenced by the dress you've got going in the arsenic green.
I'm just wearing my pajamas. What are you talking about? I was sleeping in that.
That's LA casual.
Yeah, this is what I sleep in every night.
Well, you're very Los Angeles now. You're very...
I've gone full LA. Maureen knew me back when I lived in New York, and now I wear gowns while I watch
gowns. When I saw you here, you saw like pockets full of rats, and now you're just very fancy.
I was eating pizza, pulling it from my hoodie pockets.
Well, that's because you're a podcast superstar.
Thank
but
you.
How did this all come about?
Oh,
was it? Yeah.
Or just all of it?
How did you come about, Dana?
I loved writing from the time I was a child. I just always wanted to be a writer, even if I didn't know that it was a way to make a living. I was a voracious reader. And then I was pre-med in college because I thought that if you're good at science, you're just supposed to go be a doctor. And I was good at it. And so I was getting all like the right and wrong positive reinforcement, like I was good at being a pre-med student. Like I was getting good grades and I was getting good internships and I was doing it. So like the universe was reinforcing like, oh, you're supposed to do this, even though I was deeply unhappy. And sometimes the universe reinforces things that aren't the right thing for you. But I had this sort of come to Jesus moment where I realized that if I was going to actually become a doctor, I would be miserable. And so my senior year of college, I was just like, I want to be a writer and I'm going to do everything in my power to be a writer. And I went for it. I moved to New York. I freelanced for any publication that would have me. I wrote a bunch of books and just said yes to every opportunity. And then I just felt like as my career progressed through my 20s, I was sort of able to, like, I'm thinking that the metaphor I have in my head would work better if I knew the name for it. Like, imagine like a old-timey gold prospector, when they like go do that thing.
The pan for gold?
Pan for gold. I felt like I was able to like pan through all these opportunities and like kind of narrow it down to the actual things that I like doing. And now I feel really lucky that like the projects that I'm working on are like really fun television projects. I, write for magazines when there's an exciting opportunity. I get to write this podcast I love called Nova Blood, where I learn about historical royals and scandals and murders and deaths. And now I get to write books like Anatomy and its forthcoming sequel about spooky grave robbers and surgery in my favorite city in my favorite time period.
I was joking with the "where did Dana come from" question, but you actually nailed it. So I was like, no,
I'm
she's
just
professional. No, she's good. But what was the impetus with where did Anatomy begin?
Oh, so I actually thought of it on it was one of those book ideas that just sort of hits you like a whoosh of just like, this full story is like, it's done. And I feel like on a plane ride, this was when I was like moving to LA or, EW did some work in LA. And so I was definitely on a plane from New York to LA. And on that plane with no internet, I wrote a full outline, like just in paragraph form of everything that would happen in this book. I didn't stick with it, but like the
Okay.
I know. Wouldn't it be amazing if I was like, it was fully formed and it was done, but
I landed and I had it.
It was done. No, just like a loose outline of the character, the setting, the beats. This version was like a little different. It took place in America, still like the 1800s, but like turn of the century, like America. It was the villain was a little different, but it was still a female surgeon and a grave robber, and like the characters and the atmosphere that I liked. So that's where it started. And then it just continued on from there. I like emailed that to my agent and I was like, I just want to write in this world very desperately. Like I want to write about like a spooky Grand Guignol body horror love story. And that's what it was. I just sort of like also made a list, not a list, like a Tumblr mood board of all my favorite things, like scenes from like Crimson Peak and Penny Dreadful. And I was like, you know, the scene in Nightmare Before Christmas when Jack Skellington is trying to like distill all of Christmas to be like, what is it? Like, how do I explain it? I was like on Tumblr trying to distill all the things I liked and all like the spooky goth, like Crimson Peak, My Chemical Romance, Penny Dreadful things. Like I was with my beaker being like, what is the formula? How do I crack it? How can I make it mine? I went full Jack Skellington.
I love that. And I think that Edinburgh is exactly the right city for that. I mean, I know that on Hawthorne, and I read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Oh, very Scotland.
On one of those, yeah. And that whole resurrection men, twisting roads, or as you well explain it, it's like a fish.
Yeah.
Like a fish skeleton.
It's like a fish with like a little skeleton. And I mean, all those horror-y books felt very Scottish. I mean, like you said, like Jekyll. Do you know it's pronounced Jekyll? This is a non sequitur.
Is it?
They say it's pronounced Jekyll. Isn't that screwed up? I was, but like apparently it's actually supposed to be Jekyll, which I hate. If you know anything about this, sound off in the comments, please. Someone told me that, and apparently, that's
this
the way. I'm not going to say Jekyll because imagine being the person at a party who's like, I guess, swirling cognac, and you're like, oh, I read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Everyone's going to look at you like you're an idiot. But it's apparently right.
Every time I hear them, that's going to be the face.
Yeah, no, that's the appropriate face to make. But now we both know. But yes, Scotland to me felt like
murder.
London's grungy cousin. You know, like London during this is like a little pre-Regency era, but like just about, it's like just there. It's like romantic pre-Regency. But London during the Regency era, I feel like people think of like Jane Austen and like Bridgerton, and it's very like coiffed curls and like that like very white stone and like the very like ordered, mannered society of like BBC Jane Austen. And I wanted something a little like messier.
Yeah, it just feels like you could actually find someone's intestines on the ground, sort of by accident, under a top hat.
Yeah, that's where intestines go. And also Scotland was like the center of surgery at the time. I mean, like I read all these biographies to do research for it. And I read a lot about like Dr. Liston, who's different than Dr. Lister, but they existed kind of overlap for a period, which was a whole thing for me to unravel in my brain. But a lot of these really famous surgeons were working and came out of Edinburgh. So it really made sense that it would be the heart of a story about, anatomy.
Anatomy, and it's not a real operation until someone just literally sticks their finger in there. Like, make sure it's really dirty too. Just really get in there and just so bad.
This is something that I learned unrelated to anatomy because it took place in Eastern Europe. There was a guy named Ignaz Semmelweis who was a we would call it like an OBGYN, like a doctor who delivered babies. And he noticed that all the women that he was delivering babies for, all these women all across Eastern Europe were dying of what they called at the time childbirth fever. And he was like, maybe if we washed our hands before we reached inside these women, they might not die of fever. And it was so widely mocked that he went clinically insane, was thrown in an insane asylum, and died 2 weeks later. just because he told doctors that maybe women wouldn't die if they washed their hands.
That escalated quickly.
Oh yeah. Clinically insane. That's how much other doctors made fun of him.
He seems sensitive.
Yeah. It's not. And the worst part is he died of infection.
It just seems like they're like, they laughed at him and he instantly like barrel rolled through a window.
Yeah.
Into a pile of pitchforks.
Yeah. So I did a lot of research on obscure medical historical figures. And he seemed like a very sensitive soul. I guess you have to be a sensitive soul to think of hand washing before people are doing it.
Yeah. Well, we think of it now. Thank you. Just wash them. Happy birthday. Just remember.
Yeah,
never forget. So you kind of put this together on a plane. You make a mood board. You distill. You do the science.
Yeah.
People would call you mad, like you're in your lab at night. You're like, they think I'm crazy. I'm washing my hands. I've got beakers.
Yeah, I was like dark academia, Scotland, love, horses, graveyards. And then it all came together on a board with string and said anatomy at the heart of it. I wanted to call the book Rigor Mortis, a love story. But I think they didn't think that teenagers would know what rigor mortis was. But I think teenagers do. But apparently
I think so.
people don't like Latin.
What's anatomy derived from, the word?
Oh, don't make me do this. I have no idea.
Is Anna, is that a Greek?
I can Google this. If I freeze again, it's in the service of this.
At the heart of it. If someone finally was like, at the heart of it, I see what you did there. She's done it twice.
Okay. It looks like Greek, tomia, cutting. It literally means cutting up. Anatomia.
Yeah. There it is.
We did
it. You got it in the end.
I did it and I didn't freeze. And now the other window is closed and I think we're through the woods.
But what was the, because, you could go down that research rabbit hole.
Yeah. And indeed I did.
What kind of stuff were you doing?
Oh, I have like my shelf of books. I'll look over my shoulder. A lot of biographies of early surgeons. And then if I took stuff I wanted and stuff I didn't want, I would just be like, it's fiction and I get to change history if I want. So I would there's some anachronisms in the book that you might notice. But I say it's because, Dr. Beecham's not real. And if he existed in this universe, certain medical procedures were invented beforehand. Like someone gets an appendectomy or he gives someone an appendectomy before they would have medically. But I'm like, he also invented anesthesia in this universe. So things are happening a little earlier because of the plot. So basically I did a ton of research and then decided what I wanted to throw out. And then I think the benefit of doing a lot of noble blood and writing a ton of noble blood is that I was pretty comfortable writing in period, like in time period. So I was pretty comfortable being like, all right, what was happening in 1817? What, were people's lives like? What were people wearing? I sort of had like little Easter eggs to myself of like details of her clothing that's anachronistic in certain ways and futuristic in other ways to imply certain things about her character. But yeah, this is great. No one watches Macbeth to learn Scottish history. That's great. Yeah, I hope that no one's reading anatomy to learn actual science. There's a tiny bit of real science in there, but very little. It's mostly made up science. But just to get the gist.
It's sciencey.
It's science adjacent. It's like Frankenstein science. I've been rereading Frankenstein because I'm leading this pilgrimage in April, which if people haven't signed up, I think there's still room. I'm leading a pilgrimage to England to talk about Mary Shelley and Frankenstein in April, which I'm very excited about. But the scene where Dr. Frankenstein comes up with like his solution of like how to resurrect a dead body. I don't know if you remember, but that paragraph is he's like, and then suddenly it came to me, the answer to all of it. It just came to me so clear that I couldn't believe that I hadn't thought of it before. And I knew I was the only person to ever think of it. I'm not going to tell you because I don't want to tempt you, but trust me, I got it. And it's like, great. Mary Shelley, that is exactly the way you get around coming up with something impossible. And I should have copied that a little more.
Yeah, just like it's too, I would tell you, but it's too hard to explain. You wouldn't understand it.
And you know what? I even would say it's too obvious. I feel like if
I don't want to insult you.
Yeah, I would take it away.
Yeah. Look, I'm not gonna be a jerk about it.
Yeah, I would be condescending if I explained it to you.
So you did just slip in there that there is going to be a sequel.
Yes, there is going to be a sequel. If anyone, I don't want to give away the ending of the book, but the ending, is a slightly ambiguous note. And I always at least had it in my mind of how the story would continue. And the publishers were lucky enough to agree. And so I'm writing a sequel that I don't know what I can say because it's not like a written in the sense that like words are written on a page, yet or at all. But I will say it comes down to London for a time period. And we get to see more of the characters you know and love.
There's a lot of good. I did a book that had some overlap with Resurrection Men in London. And so I did a bunch of hanging out in the places where they would pick up the bodies and sell them. Yeah. And there was literally a pub. So what they would do is they would bring the bodies in, and there was a pub that had these seats along the walls that had kind of boards up, just so you could prop the bodies up. So they would be sitting up, and so you'd go in and you'd see this like room full of people sitting up like this, but they were just all dead bodies. And then the medical students would come in and be like, "I'll take that one," when they would drag it across the street. Yeah.
Amazing. I mean, this is why I was like, oh, I have to write about this. As soon as I learned about Burke and Hare, who were two real guys who started murdering people to sell their bodies to cut out the middlemen of digging, I was like, oh, this is exactly the type of YA world I want to live in. It's just so gross and fun.
Yeah, people went to a lot of trouble just at the mort safes and the guardians and the night watchmen and all this stuff, and burying it with like big cages over the body that's to keep people from digging up your, This is a peek behind the curtain. I wore Spanx with this dress, even though I'm sitting down. I don't know why I did that. That's a very. I'm not even showing my torso, but everyone who's in this Zoom know that I'm very sleek underneath here. You're 100% committed. Yeah, it's like you have to like get into character. I had to like really prepare. It's not one of the situations where I'm in sweatpants under my boobs. No, Dana is classy 100% of the time. I'm LA. We know I'm LA. You are LA. I am wearing pajama bottoms. So, I'm not going to lie about that. But it's hot here. In your defense, it's much later in New York. It's later. It's also very cold, which means inside it's very warm. It's just. Can I say something very exciting that I just want everyone only to keep on the group chat and don't share this on social media? This is just for the 105 people who are here. I was driving in LA today and I'm like 60% sure I saw John Mulaney and Olivia Munn walking. I almost did a U-turn. I did. Tell us everything. I don't know, but like, isn't that wild? What a day. Did they have a baby with them? It was two people with a baby. He was in a baseball hat. And I was like, that sounds like them. I'm going to say 60% sure. And it was just like, what a day. Wow. That's so LA. I don't know if I'd thrive in LA, although I wish I want to move there though. It's true that I've been tempted. You could be driving towards Los Feliz and just see the I guess most scandalous pair of 2021 just walking a baby. Wow. I was very excited. To me, I was like, I would want to see that. What a day for me. Thank you. I see. So who have I seen that's exciting recently? Nobody really. Don't go anywhere. That I'm 60% sure that I saw John Mulaney and Olivia Munn, guys. She's 100% sure. I honestly contemplated doing a U-turn, and then I thought, no, you can't do that, Dana. And so I kept driving. Were they just walking down the sidewalk? Yeah. Like normal people, unlike me, the non-normal person contemplating doing a U-turn. But I didn't do a U-turn. I got very excited walking around LA with my friend Robin, and I picked an orange off of a tree, and I was so excited by that. I said, I have to move here immediately because I could just pick an orange off the tree.
Can I tell you something unbelievable? In our backyard,
Okay.
which you can't see because these are shades pulled and it's also dark out, we have an orange tree, a grapefruit tree, a lemon tree, and a loquat tree. Like plucking fresh fruit. I've baked pies and cakes with fruit from my own backyard. Isn't that like?
All right, I'm moving. I'm
Move to
moving.
LA. Everyone, it's great. It's sunny here a lot.
If I could pluck anything, I would still not eat it that I got from anything around here.
I would say that the lemon is a game changer because I always forget. Like you're always reading a recipe and it's like juice of half a lemon, zest of a lemon. You always forget, and then you can just go to the backyard and you get a lemon.
All right, I'm moving. I'm moving.
It's great. Game changer.
It's a very different place than Scotland.
Yes, anatomy, a love story.
Well, no, I mean, I'm just saying that you live in sort of a place that is in temperamentally, climate, just looks, architecturally. Scotland is this, and what I do love about this is I really did feel as close as I've ever felt to being in Scotland in the early 19th century. It's so evocative and spooky and gross and full of viscera, delicious viscera.
That's really all I wanted. I mean, to write a spooky book, you have to have there is something to be said about people who like write spooky things about LA because it's always sunny and like, oh, juxtaposition. But I love a spooky setting in a spooky book. I like the rain. I like the clouds. I like the cobblestones, the smog. Here's the thing. The word smog didn't exist yet. So that's just, you don't know what to call it. It just doesn't exist yet.
It's just dirty. They had a lot of dirty
smoke.
Dirty smoke. They were not healthy. Everything smelled really bad. Kind of like living in New York now.
It's my thing. It's not my thing, but I feel like whenever anyone ever says, oh, what time period in history would you want to live in? History is so bad to live in. One, no baths. People aren't taking baths. No deodorant and no air conditioning. To live in the time period that we live in now, where there's air conditioning and deodorant, it's a miracle. We're so blessed. Imagine how bad everything smelled back then.
And you could die from everything.
People died all the time from everything.
You caught a little infection or whatever, and you're dead.
I think it was also I didn't know that a pandemic subplot would be quite as relevant as it is.
Right.
I was more just like, oh, that's a thing that happened in the 1800s.
That won't happen again.
No, that's irrelevant.
People won't be terrified of a weird, quickly spreading sickness that.
No, rich people won't be desperate to get cures.
People won't just flee and leave other people behind to die.
Oh, Jesus. The one disparate healthcare system than the poor.
Well, you saw it all coming.
Yes, it's me. I figured it out.
I've gone through because we've talked about some of the things that are in the questions, but I want to get to some of these really specifically because there's some really good ones.
Yes, I would love that.
We've asked about the research process.
Yeah.
And I just want to know also, just because I don't, more specifically, was there any part of the research aside from books? Like anything you did or anything you...
I would say research clothes a lot. I was on a lot of websites that like detailed like clothing plates. So like what people actually wore in this time period. And then I picked and chose, just trying to take what I liked and leave what I didn't. It definitely was a case where some things I chose over, I made decisions sometimes where I'm just like, I like this over accuracy, but now I can't remember specifically what there were, but I wasn't super rigid in my, if there was something I really liked aesthetically, I think the goal of the book was really vibes.
I just like that. It's just my goal was vibes.
The goal was vibes.
Gina has asked, what was your dream for this book at the beginning, and how does it match up to the reality of how it's turned out? So I think
okay, this is going to be brutally honest and very vulnerable, and maybe I should save this for therapy. But have you ever had, I mean, I'm sure you have, but you're a brilliant writer. I really, there's so much of everything I love is in this book. Like, I love this setting. I love this time period. I love this world, the theatricals. I love how, who Hazel is and who Jack is. And when I wrote that outline, like, I really loved the idea for this book. And so for a long time, I was really scared to write it because I didn't want to waste the good idea on something I wasn't good enough at writing to achieve. Like, I mean, it's like, imagine in your head, you can picture like a perfect drawing of a friend's face. But then when you actually try to draw it, you're like, well, why can't I do it? It's so clear up here. So obviously, like, there are things about the book that it's hard to write a book. It takes a long time. There's a million balls in the air that you're juggling at any one time between language, pacing, plot, characters, keeping it interesting for the reader, setting a tone. Like, at least for me, you're keeping so many things in your head at once that, like, and just sometimes, like, you do the best you can. And so I would say, like, I really did try to make it live up to my vision. I think nothing is ever as good as it could be up here. You're like, it's like a Gothic masterpiece or whatever, but I'm really proud of it. Did I answer that question?
I think so.
Yeah.
Because I mean, I definitely relate to that in terms of, like, it took me a long time to write a murder mystery because I really loved them. And so I thought, I can't do that.
Yeah.
It's very weird.
I feel that too about everything. Every idea I have, I'm very precious with, because I'm scared I'm not good enough to write it. And I just think, like, one day I'll be talented enough to write this. And then you realize if you keep thinking like that, you're never going to do it. And no one's ever good enough to write an idea. No idea is ever as good, like, as perfect as it exists in your mind when you put it to paper. So you just have to suck it up and do the work and do the best you can.
I just want to point out that one of your castle mates has popped up in the chat.
Oh my gosh, who?
Gary.
Gary, hi. Oh, this is so exciting.
It's real.
It was real. I was at Hawthornden.
You were really there.
You know what's out in the world.
Do you have a favorite scene? The way that they've asked, do you have a favorite scene you feel comfortable telling us about?
Oh, yeah.
I want to know if you have a favorite scene that you're uncomfortable telling us about.
I like Hazel and Jack's first kiss, which is in a grave. I don't think that's a spoiler to say that. It's called a love story. I don't think, but
I think it's, yeah.
I liked that idea. I thought it was fun. I thought it was kind of like, it's an homage to Mary Shelley, who allegedly lost her virginity on her mom, Mary Wollstonecraft's grave. So it's sort of like
goth.
The cap to that. So goth queen. I like that I named the horse Beetlejuice, but after the star, but it's a Easter egg because my cat's name is Beetlejuice, but like spelled like the movie. I like the scene early on, the first time we meet Dr. Strain, who's like the scary, like rigid anatomy teacher, surgeon in town. He's pulling a man's tooth and putting it in a rich guy's mouth. And that's a thing that surgeons actually did. That's a scene I lifted directly from history. They thought that because for a while they would just pull old teeth out and then rich people would put other people's old teeth in their mouth, or they would make dentures out of those old teeth. But for a period, kind of in this period, they thought that if you pulled the tooth out while it was still like fresh and still had like life force attached, it would reattach in someone else's mouth if you put it in, which is not true. It will not work. So don't get any big ideas. But that is a thing that actually existed. And that scene is so visceral to me and so scary and so metaphorically resonant that I wrote a scene about it.
I think they also used to take teeth from bodies on like the battlefield.
Oh, they did. But see, this is what we're talking about. Dead body teeth don't stick as
It's
well.
not as good. It's not as good.
Quite as good.
There were so many from Waterloo. They called them Waterloo teeth.
Oh my God. It's so gross.
Got a mouthful of Waterloo teeth.
So gross. Being alive back then was so gross. If you take away nothing else from my book, take away that it was so gross to be alive.
The past was disgusting. Everybody was eating unrefrigerated food and getting food poisoning and dying of nothing.
I was describing to an acquaintance that this book takes place pre-anesthesia. I was describing like, oh, it's, about wanting to be a surgeon. But again, this is the era before anesthesia. Surgery is more like butchery. And he looked at me and he's like, what did they do if they didn't have anesthesia? And I was like, you just drank some whiskey and bit down on something really hard and did your best. It's like a scene out of Yellow Jackets.
Which I haven't seen yet. I'm very excited to watch. I hear it's great.
Yeah, people dig it. My fiance Ian and I, we just sort of like, we watched the pilot and then we're like, all right. And then everyone was talking about it. So we're like, okay, we'll get back in. We'll do it.
Yeah, I'm behind the curve. I'm saving it up for, I don't know, nothing. Saving it for nothing.
I've been binging Jeopardy episodes.
Whoa.
Is that cool? Is that a cool thing I said?
I didn't know you. I guess I didn't know you could binge Jeopardy.
If you record them in advance and then don't watch them for a while, then you can just go and watch them all at once.
You can binge anything.
Yeah. Yeah. You can binge anything you want.
A couple people would like to know where your dress is from.
Turn the HD off because I think it would make my video worse quality, but whatever. Ian got it for me for Hanukkah. It's a brand called Vampire's Wife, and it's very good dress. Yeah, it's like a special occasion dress that I wish I had more excuses to wear. But it's like one of those dresses that's so fancy that I'm going to take every opportunity in the world to wear it forever.
That's a fancy dress.
Yeah, it was a good Hanukkah present. It was a good gift.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just, a couple of you have asked. Well, you've sort of addressed this a little bit, but what is your writing process?
Procrastination and then panic.
Yep.
But really, I am someone who likes like a fully fledged idea before I start writing. Otherwise, I just sort of flounder. I like an outline. I like usually like an outline that's like 2 pages of just paragraph. Like I just wrote the whole story, but in like a 2-page format. Even if I change from there, I just like having the big idea and the broad strokes. And then from there, I sort of fill in the characters. I try to like describe them to myself in a way that makes them interesting. I'm like, oh, Dr. Strain, a surgeon who worked his way up from nothing. And so he resents like the nobility and the upper class. And like, even if that doesn't like come through in the book, like I have those things in my head. And so then I like fill out the characters and then I just sort of dive in when the panic of an impending deadline and the thought of disappointing people who believed in me and paid me money becomes too much to bear.
Right. Yeah. I feel that's pretty much, that's the secret sauce.
I think I do a lot of writing also in my head before bed. Like I'll close my eyes like before I fall asleep and just like write full sentences like in my head. And then when I wake up, even if I don't remember those exact sentences, I pictured the angles and the way to approach the scene. So I like to visualize things before I go. I can't go in blind.
And sorry, I keep closing this little window when I need to keep it open. We have, oh boy, here you go. How do you push past writer's block and procrastination?
The panic one is the answer. No, honestly, and this is the worst possible answer. I'm someone who like refreshes Twitter and my email constantly, which is bad as a writer and something that I really need to break. I would say the things I do is telling a friend to change my Twitter password and tell her not to give it back until I'm done. And shout out to my friend Katie, who changed my Twitter password while I was writing on anatomy. I use an app called Self-Control on my computer, which blocks everything, all like the sites that I went to. And then I just like close the door and put on some like music scores and just think like, okay, the first 100 words are going to be garbage. So just write 100 garbage words. But then usually it's one of those things that by the time I start writing, I'm kind of enjoying myself. It's so hard to get me to start writing. But then once I'm writing, I'm like, oh, this is fun. Why aren't I always doing this? So it's just like an elaborate game of trickery. Like I'm a toddler, even though I'm an adult.
That you're getting yourself to eat broccoli.
Yeah, I get myself to eat broccoli, even though I like broccoli and have chosen eating broccoli for my career because I'm passionate about broccoli and all I want to do is talk about broccoli for the rest of my life.
You're like, how can I avoid this broccoli that I've put on my own plate?
Yeah.
On a plate that says my favorite food.
Yeah, exactly. But then as soon as I eat it, I'm like, wait, broccoli's good, guys.
Man, this broccoli, I'm pounding this broccoli.
Yeah. So that's what it's like. That I feel like is the best possible description of my process.
I relate heavily to that. Really specific one here. This is a question. I work for a history podcast too. And it's amazing to discover how many supposedly modern phenomena exist across history.
Yes.
Was there anything surprisingly modern you discovered in your research for anatomy?
Oh gosh, I don't know in anatomy. I mean, people were making like wax models of limbs and like body parts, which is very cool. I would say like to me the most surprisingly modern thing is not a thing at all. It's the way people talked and the way people lived their lives. Like reading letters from the 1800s and people just being like, oh, I know people are telling me that I should marry him, but I don't want to. Like people's thoughts and feelings and emotions are the same and have been the same for hundreds of years. So for me, always the thing that's surprisingly modern is the way, even if people phrase things in a more, floral or eloquent way, even if people communicated things differently, their human feelings at the end of the day were the same. People were jealous. People felt threatened. People felt insecure. People felt insecure a lot. People felt horny. People had crushes. Like once you realize that people in history are not just like two-dimensional paper things, but they were real human beings who like were writing about but lived fundamentally full human lives. It's a lot less intimidating to write, stories like Noble Blood. And it's a lot less intimidating to write episodes of Anatomy to realize like, oh, Hazel lived in the 1800s, but she was a teenager. And this is how being a teenager feels. Mm-hmm. Still raised in her time. I will say like a pet peeve of mine is in like historical fiction or dystopian fiction when it's like a totally different world and the heroine, or like usually just like the whisper thin heroine, acts and thinks like was pulled from our world into their world, where she's like, this world sucks. I see it for what it is. And it's like, you wouldn't. You grew up in it. So it was important for me to make Hazel still feel like she was of the time and like her thoughts and beliefs were like the thoughts and beliefs she grew up with. And it didn't feel like she was a, 2021 girl who just was magically transported back to pre-Regency England.
Yeah, no, and I think that really comes across too. That now that you've said that,
Jesus,
I was like, yeah, no, she's right.
When people are like, this system that I made up, like the author through their main characters, like this system is bullshit. And you're like, yeah, you invented this system. You're like, this thing I made up wouldn't it be bad if this thing happened? And we all are like, yeah, it would be bad.
It would be bad, actually.
Mm-hmm. So that is something I tried to avoid. And I think like with the character Bernard, which I'll pronounce because he's British and like the British way, because I think Bernard is like, that's a different name. There's a character named Bernard who Hazel is engaged to. And I think like a modern person would be like, ew, I don't want to have an, arranged marriage. But like for Hazel, this is something that like she was raised in and lives and understands as an important part of her life. And so she's not as reticent to do this arrangement as maybe a modern heroine would be.
I love that. Because it's true.
Yeah.
And you know what? I'm just glad you've said that.
Yeah.
Makes me very happy.
Yeah. So someone had to. I'm a very brave person.
There you go. And I think this should probably be the last question. And because we've covered a lot of these.
Yeah, it's been a lot of talking.
But just through the nature of the conversation, we've covered a bunch of this. But someone asked the question. Hold on. I hit the little wheel and I wheeled past it, which is about why is this a YA book is basically the question.
Oh, I have a good answer to this because I thought about it. Before I started writing, I was like, is it going to be a YA book? Is it going to be an adult book? Mm-hmm. I don't think my writing would really fundamentally change one way or the other. I don't think the age of the character would really change one way or the other. I mean, I could age her up a year or two. But I realized this was a YA book because I was thinking about the central conflict of the book. And the conflict of Hazel, my protagonist, was figuring out what she wants to do for the rest of her life, determining whether or not she's capable of it, and then in the intermix of that, having a first crush, having a first, crush. She's been a very pragmatic person, and she sort of thought that, love and relationships were a matter of pragmatism, and then that sort of gets thrown to the wayside when she realizes that, no, it can be fun and romantic and a little sexy. And those, to me, are fundamentally things that young adults go through. The question of what you want to do for the rest of your life, I am still going through it, but it's one that I think it sort of comes to a head when you're in your late teens. And the feeling of a first crush and of having that first crush when you're also having the metaphorical first crush of finding the career you love or the thing that you're passionate about, that to me felt thematically like something I would want to tell through the lens of a young adult character.
That's a great answer.
Yeah, I did think about this a lot. That's
yeah, I get that question a lot too, and it's always it's not just one answer each time.
I think thematically, YA books cover different things, and the things that teenagers go through when they're teenagers are different than the things I am going through in my late 20s. I will also say, when I was a teenager, I loved spooky movies and My Chemical Romance and kind of spooky goth things, and I kind of wanted to capture that vibe. And so I was like, I'm writing this book of anatomy, a love story, and all of its corresponding aesthetic for my teenage self. So that's also why it's YA, because I loved those things when I was a teenager, and I wanted it to sort of have that earnestness. Maybe you can love things unironically as a teenager in a way that it's more difficult,
and in a totally pure and beautiful way.
Yeah.
So I love that. And I love this book.
A great last question to end on.
And I love everybody that came.
Everyone who came, thank you so much.
And I love your dress.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad I had an excuse to wear it. Maureen, thank you so much. This was a pleasure. Everyone, I'm quelling over Anatomy release day.
Thank you both. I want to thank Maureen for guiding us through this discussion tonight. Thank you. And Dana, thank you for doing this with us, and congratulations on the new book.
Thank you.
And we look forward to seeing you again for sign more books, because I'm sure we'll run out at some point. So
anytime
we'll hit you up, and then the next book when it comes out. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Before I close this out, I just want to let everybody know, if you joined us late, immediately after we end this broadcast, it will save. It will take maybe about a minute. So if you joined us late, you can watch the entire program. It is saved into an archive, and you can watch it then. So thank you all for joining us, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.